this picture. This is a real life picture. It's not a computer simulation, but something looks funny that the backs of the buildings are facing the street. And this is a result directly of the existing code. So through the miracle of computer imagery, we reversed it to get a reaction from folks. This was actually out in Tennessee, how different it would be if the buildings faced the street. And so often a developer, in this case, wasn't even allowed to face the buildings to the street, but the code said, basically, you need to screen off the street because it's a busy street and who wants to live facing a street? But when you start to then go in and add certain details, you can see that the livability of the street becomes nicer. If it's landscaped properly, there's a fence there that's kind of delineating the private space from the public space. The trees add a little more character. The buildings look like they're more loved because there's somebody manicuring the landscape. And then, when you look back at what you've got, it really kind of sends the signal home, don't you want to make your community look nicer? And it's not the buildings themselves, it's how they're situated on the lots. Just that simple orientation of how buildings face, that relationship of buildings to the street. And we look at so many corridors all across the country. This is probably the biggest blight on the planet, and our worst export is suburban sprawl. And so how can you fix it? The first thing you need to do is kind of establish where do the buildings sit on the site to get that consistency. And then so we call that the build-to line or mandatory setback line or just simply the setback. But the idea is to get buildings conform. That's what older communities did before people had automobiles, when they were walking and bicycling and pushing the wheelbarrow. That's what they had. So then it's those elements that are in the public space that start to make that sense of community. So sidewalks and how tall are the trees or what kinds of trees are there? How do you address parking? How do you make parking efficient, noticeable, but not the thing that dominates the street scene? And then, how tall are the buildings? Are there limits to how big the buildings should be? Like how long are they or how many breaks that you have? And those are the kinds it's that visioning that you have to do as a community to decide the kind of place that you want so that then you can write the rules to get that result. Let me just click it ahead. And so this one shows, there you see the buildings lining up with the public, or where that build-to line is, and it's starting to create some sense of place. Because the shapes, the buildings that face the street are basically creating the room. And that is a computer simulation of that concept. So it has all of the details. In this case, they wanted a train, I guess, a light rail system, but you can see there's space for landscaping, there's space for people to walk, there's space to sit on a bench. There's some shade and shelter for pedestrians, and then the red lines there show how you get that continuity between the buildings. And so if we're talking about trying to make places that are great for bicycling and safe to walk on, our best lesson is to look back through time, and we can see that those main streets or neighborhood streets, there's some kind of continuity there. So here's an example from Arlington, Virginia, where there was a grocery store that once upon a time had windows and doors that faced the street. But probably what happened was the street was widened and the demand for parking was more strong. So the front of the building turned into the side and they just closed that up. So through a community design effort like what we're talking about today, we did illustrations to show how that could be transformed. And they were talking about light rail. We showed how it doesn't matter so much about the style, but again, it's kind of the positioning of the buildings that help set that place and sense of happening. And so, what do you know? Somebody came along and built it. And so it has plenty of parking inside. It has a grocery store. It actually has a giant grocery store, they call it. So it's a large grocery store with more products, more produce, more products than the Safeway had, a little more higher scale. And so how that was done was through a form-based code. The little yellow blob kind of shows where that was. These were properties that were only commercial where it was allowed. And then, so what we're doing is adding the residential to the commercial that was already permitted. And then the streets were coded by character. So in this area, where that Safeway was is in that corner up in the upper left. And so, but look at the street behind it. You had the backs of the buildings facing the street and 4 different zoning categories addressing that same street. So this is just zooming in a little bit. So, and see what happens when you get that, you got like the back wall of the commercial building facing single-family houses. And so the rules were applied so that we were addressing the street to try to create some kind of regularity of how the buildings face the street, no matter what the use was. And so the next view is going to be down at the ground level to show you what happened with the new building with these new rules, if it clicks in. So that was that brick wall. And so what they did was they built the grocery store and they built the commercial uses, but they lined all of that to face the residential street with residential building types. And so they're basically townhouses. And so now that the character of that street is great.